Alright, so first is some background on the Dominican Republic from 1800 to 1900. The island of Hispaniola was the first island that Columbus stumbled upon in 1492, which established Spanish control. The east was controlled by Spain and the west was controlled by France a bit later on. Throughout the 1500s, African slaves were imported to the island to feed the work requirements for the sugar production on the island. And from 1795 to 1808, France controlled the entire island, so that did establish a little more French culture in the Dominican Republic later on, as well as until 1844, the Dominican Republic and Haiti, once the Haitians declared independence. Both the Dominican Republic and Haiti were the same country until they split up. So now we'll move on to the Dominican Republic in the 1800s. So from 1795 to 1808, the French had complete control of Hispaniola until a revolt from Spanish supporters in the eastern side of the island. So Spain reassumed control at that point of the entire eastern half of the island, while the French were pushed back to what is now Haiti. Connecting back to the Napoleonic situation in Europe, when the Spanish king was forced out of power, the Haitian slaves, Creoles, and people from the eastern parts of the island saw the situation as an opportunity for a sustained run at independence and revolted against the current Spanish government and French government on the eastern side. In 1844, the Dominican Republic was differentiated from Haiti, resulting in economic and social differentiation from the western side of the island. The wealthy administration of the new country, the Dominican Republic, attempted re-annexation by Spain, which failed because of revolts in the country of the lower classes. After this, Spain withdrew all claims and intentions of influence in the New World. In 1865, a new government was installed that was based heavily on the U.S. government. So now we'll go on to some background on what was happening in the U.S. around 1800 and a little bit past then. So in 1803 and 1804, the Louisiana Purchase was instituted by Jefferson, and the Lewis and Clark expeditions marked the beginning of the cultural idea of manifest destiny, which spills over into the rest of the country's history, and especially the rest of this century. In 1823, the Monroe Doctrine proclaimed that the U.S. was prepared to defend its own interests in the world using its military, and the Declaration told the European powers that Latin America is now closed for new colonization. Because of this, the U.S. now strives to create and control emerging markets in Latin America. In 1860, the Civil War pauses U.S. foreign policy, so it sort of, for that brief amount of time, left Latin American countries and especially markets alone. And post-war U.S. saw Republicans resume the path to control markets and a renewed striving for industrialization. And it also saw, at the end of the century, a slight turn towards leaving these markets alone once again, and we can see some interesting connections between these and the Dominican Republic's development. So finally, we'll go on to some connections and parallels between the U.S. and Dominican Republic development and how the U.S. influenced Dominican Republic policy and culturally how it influenced it. So post-1822, the hands of the U.S. were pretty much tied because of their alliance with France, and yet their doctrine of support for independence movements provisioned for the U.S. to help Haiti's new nation. So there was a lot of popular support for this support of revolutionary spirit in these different Latin American countries, but the administration of the U.S. was not in favor of it because of its complications with their alliance with France. So the U.S. wanted to form a relationship with the new nation because of its desire to encourage emerging markets to become dependent on U.S. goods. So when the Dominican Republic separated from Haiti, there was a brief period where the U.S. did extend relations to the country before the Dominican Republic administration vied for a return to Spanish rule following Napoleon's removal in Spain. As the U.S. began a small isolationist period in the late 19th century, it focused on expanding and building within North America, so the Dominican Republic withdrew its ties for re-annexation after an uprising led by the middle class and Creoles from Spain. And so the Dominican Republic was left on its own for a period of time in the late 19th century after all this popular support in America and the Dominican Republic for even a possible annexation from the U.S. for the Dominican Republic. So in 1906, everything culminated so that the U.S. signed over a 50-year treaty with the Dominican Republic, which stipulated that the U.S. would pay the Dominican Republic's debts in exchange for taking over its customs department, which includes trade, obviously. And this deal was possible because of the split of the Dominican Republic from Haiti, which allowed the U.S. not to get mixed up with European powers that still saw it as a stake for Europe in the New World. So, because it was a new nation, and the U.S. had this desire to control it as an emerging market that was very close to home, there was a lot of popular support there, so it came to fruition.